You are listening to Thinner Peace in Menopause and Beyond with Dr. Deb Butler. This is episode number 264. Welcome to Thinner Peace in Menopause and Beyond. This is Dr. Deb Butler, Master Life and Weight Coach, and as always, your coach. If you're a woman and you're smart and you're successful and you've been struggling with weight your whole life, and now menopause is making it harder than ever, and you are ready to make this the last time you ever have to go on a diet again, then this podcast is for you. Stay tuned. Hello, all my dear friends. How are you today? Well, I'm really excited because part of what I'm doing is I've done a new 3-part series on urges. And I know so many of you are so interested in them because basically what I've been talking about is, like, for instance, what is an urge? And an urge is when you feel something physically in your body that makes you feel like you urgently have to do something. Now, the problem with this urgent feeling inside of you is that if it leads to a positive result, it's not a problem. But most of the times, the things that I'm talking about is that these urges lead to negative results. And specifically what we're talking about in these 3 parts of the podcast is the whole idea of eating when you're not hungry and wondering what the heck is going on inside of you. Why can't you control yourself? Why can't you do this? And so I've been using Pema Chodron's book, Taking the Leap, in these last 3 episodes to talk about urges and to give you different examples of how urges work. So in my first podcast on this, which was 262, I talked about the whole idea of comparing urges in your primal brain as an unruly, undisciplined toddler. You've heard me talk about this undisciplined toddler a lot. A screaming toddler, right? Who wants what he wants when he wants it. Happens a lot, right? And those of you who have grandkids or those of you who have kids or have raised kids know that when they want what they want, especially young kids, they want it. And when you say no, they test you. They want to see if you really mean it. And so they use all of these very interesting tactics to try to get what they want. And usually it's really unwanted behavior. But the reason that they use this unwanted behavior, like screaming and crying and acting bratty, is because it's so uncomfortable to the parent that usually the parent will give in and give them what they don't want to give them just to make them quiet. So that's kind of the deal with the toddler and the screaming toddler, and comparing that to your primal brain and urges of wanting something to eat that really is going to give you a negative result. It's not going to give you anything you want, but your primal brain's making you act like if you don't eat it, you're going to die. An urge is urgent. So that's what I did in that podcast. Now, in the podcast that I did last week, I then compared urges to the Buddhist philosophy of what one of Pema's teachers taught was the whole idea of poison ivy. And if you remember, what I was talking about is that when a child or when an adult, when anybody has poison ivy, it's such a perfect example of what not to do, right? Because poison ivy itself itches, right? And what you find out, and what you may know if you've ever had it or dealt with a child that's had it, is if they itch it, it starts oozing. And when it oozes, it spreads. And then it gets worse. And then it itches more. And the cycle goes on and on. And what we teach our children, either by taking them to the doctor, or if that's what we're doing for ourselves, is we're encouraged to stop itching it, because what will happen is if we stop itching it, it will stop itching, which is exactly the opposite of what it feels like, because the urge is to itch. It's that primal part of your brain that's going, I'm going to die if you don't itch it. And yet we know the smarter part of our brain or the doctor that we see, or the smart parent that says, sweetheart, if you want to heal, the only way to heal from this is to stop itching it. And out of self-love as a parent or as a child, we do the right thing because we care enough about ourselves to heal. The healing is in dealing with the discomfort. So that's what I talked about in my second podcast, was the poison ivy metaphor. So today what I want to talk about is, now that you understand the poison ivy metaphor, you understand the toddler metaphor, you understand a little bit about the urges that happen in your body and in your brain that make you feel like you have to eat something that's only going to make you gain weight, right? Like, you know that, and you're not hungry, and half the time you don't even like it, right? It's just something going on in your brain. And so Pema talked about in her book, she talked the whole idea about equating an urge to an old Tibetan term that is called Shempa. And Shempa basically is a 2,500-year-old term for urge. It's been used forever in human beings, that a lot of times we've got this hook inside of us. We get hooked with wanting to either say something that we shouldn't say, eat something that we know isn't going to help us, smoke something that's not going to help us, and yet we do it anyway because of this term called Shempa, this hook that we feel in our body, or what I'm calling it is an urge, right? It's all the same thing. But it's such an old philosophy that's really been successful that I want to share it with you today. And today I'm going to read you a little bit from her book. And then after I read you a little bit about Shempa, I'm going to read you a 3-part simple process. She calls it a transmutation process for how to deal with urges, or how to deal with Shempa. Same thing, different words. Urges are more what we talk about now in psychology. Shempa is the exact same word that's been used for 2,500 years. So I like using this 2,500-year technique because it's tried, it's successful, and I want you to try it too. Because part of what Pema teaches, she's all about meditation. She's all about staying present with whatever is going on, being in the present moment. So being in the present moment means being present with whatever is going on. Sometimes you like it, and sometimes you don't. Urges we don't like, we really don't want to feel them. And so eating something, in the case that I'm talking about, feels like a better idea than sitting with discomfort. So I want to read you a little bit from her book, Taking the Leap. I want to read you a little bit about Shempa, and then I'm going to read you her 3-part simple process of transmutation of how you deal with Shempa or an urge. And I want you to listen very, very closely when I talk about this, and make sure that you go to my show notes by going to drdebbutler.com/264, and you can read this 3-part simple process, because sometimes I think you're going to have to read it a few times in order to be able to do it. But it's all about practice, 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 right? Bringing our minds back to the present moment. It's what Pema talks about all the time. It's about what this book is about. She has a whole chapter on how to stay. I love it. How to stay when you don't want to. How to stay when your little brain is going, that cookie looks really good. You want it, don't you? You'll just have a little bite. It won't be very much. And the more your brain starts talking, the stronger the hook is in your body, the stronger the urge is in your body. It's a feeling in your body. And what Pema's talking about is, can you stay with it and not feed it? And that's everything that I'm talking about. That's where all the success is. That's how you strengthen yourself, is by knowing that you can handle discomfort. And when you know you can handle discomfort, anything can sit in front of you. Your little brain can have all kinds of stories to tell you, and you can manage it. So Let me read you a little bit about how she talks about Shempa, and I'll talk a little bit about that, and then I'll go to the transmutation process. So first she talks about that one of the qualities of Shempa is that it's very difficult to let go of. The urge to get even, the power of craving, the potency of sheer habit is like a magnetic force pulling us in a familiar direction. So we opt again and again for short-term gratification that in the long term keeps us stuck in the same cycle. If you've done this enough, especially if you've gone through this cycle consciously, you know that the consequences are easily predictable. When we pause and breathe and abide with the energy, we can foresee quite clearly where biting the hook will lead. And just remember, my dear readers and podcast listeners, that when Pema's talking about biting the hook, she's talking about that urge or Shempa. Gradually, this understanding, this natural intelligence, supports us in our journey of abiding with the restless energy, our journey of fully partaking in our experience without being seduced by the Shempa of I like it or I can't bear to feel this. Her teacher goes on to say that he once pointed out that you may find a particular feeling intolerable, but instead of acting on that, you could come to know intolerableness very, very well. I just want to repeat that because the intolerableness that we're talking about is that discomfort, that urge, that really as human beings, that when we can sit with these negative emotions and we know we can sit with it, that is what we're trying to learn how to do as a human being. And her teacher goes on to say that you can compare this to willingly undergoing a painful medical treatment in order to cure a long-term disease. You know, just like when we were talking about poison ivy, it's the same thing. That sometimes we have to undergo discomfort to heal. And this is what I'm talking about when we're talking about the urge to eat something or to overeat something or to overdrink something. It's this discomfort, these urges, could be boredom, could be restlessness, but it feels intolerable. And what we need to learn is how to feel it. Pema talks a lot about in her book about the ability to stay and why she likes meditation so much, why she teaches it, why she thinks it's so important, because it teaches us how to stay with whatever is going on in the moment. Now, in this book, this is the most important thing. We're going to talk about the transmutation process or the 3 simple steps of what we do when we get hooked or when we feel the urge. So here she goes. She says, there is a formal practice for learning to stay with the energy of uncomfortable emotions, a practice for transmuting the poison of negative emotions into wisdom. It is similar to alchemy, the medieval technique of changing base metal into gold. You don't get rid of the base metal. It isn't thrown out and replaced by gold. Instead, the crude metal itself is the source of the precious gold. An analogy that's commonly used by Tibetans is the one of a peacock who eats poison, with the result that its tail feathers become more brilliant and glowing. This transmutation practice is specifically one of remaining open and receptive to your own energy when you are triggered. And it has 3 steps. Now, I want you to listen up as I'm reading this to you and know that you can go to my show notes, drdebbutler.com/264, and you can read this 3-step process so that you can really practice it. Step 1, acknowledge that you're hooked, right? Acknowledge that you're feeling an urge. Step 1. Step 2, pause. Take 3 conscious breaths and lean in. Lean into the energy. Abide with it. Experience it fully. Taste it. Touch it. Smell it. Get curious about it. How does it feel in your body? What thoughts does it give birth to? Become very intimate with the itch and urge of Shempa and keep breathing. Part of this step is learning not to be seduced by the momentum of Shempa. Like Ulysses, we can find our way to hear the call of the sirens without being seduced. It's a process of staying awake, compassionate, interrupting the momentum, and refraining from causing harm. Just do not speak, do not act, and just feel the energy. Be one with your own energy, one with the ebb and flow of life. Rather than rejecting the energy, embrace it. This leaning in is very open, very curious, and intelligent. So before I go on to the third step, I just want you to be aware that what she's talking about is what I'm talking to you about all the time, about allowing the urge to go through your body as opposed to resisting it, which is more like willpower. It's exactly what she's talking about, only this is a 2,500-year-old technique. Okay, step 3. After you felt it, you stayed with it, you've become curious about it. Step 3, then relax and just move on. Just go on with your life so that the practice doesn't become a big deal, an endurance test, a contest that you win or lose. The biggest challenge in doing this practice is to embrace the restless energy, to stay awake to it rather than automatically exiting it. And of course, when she says exiting it, I'm saying resisting it. When we first start experimenting with this, we find that we can abide with the unpleasantness and pull ourselves out of the tailspin for only brief moments, after which automatically habit takes over again. So I really want you to think about those 3 steps, and about the third step is about letting it go, moving on. And what she's saying is that in the beginning, it may just be for short periods of time. But if you keep practicing it, you'll be able to go for longer and longer periods of time. And so she goes on to say that it's like this for all of us. We can contact our inner strength, our natural openness for short periods before getting swept away. And this is excellent, heroic, a huge step in interrupting and weakening our ancient habits. If we keep a sense of humor and stay with it for the long haul, the ability to be present just naturally evolves. Gradually, we lose our appetite for biting the hook. We lose our appetite for aggression. If we choose to work with this kind of practice, it's wise to start practicing with little bouts of Shempa, the small irritations that happen all the time. If we become familiar with catching ourselves, acknowledging that we're hooked, and pausing in these ordinary everyday situations, then when major upheavals come, the practice will be available to us automatically. If we think we can wait until a major crisis arrives, it will be spontaneously click in, and we're wrong. So she goes on to say that traffic is a great place to practice being hooked, or what Shempa feels like. And what I'm saying to you is, I've talked to you a lot about urges. And one of the things about urges is that some are strong and some are weak. And I've talked about being able to measure them in the emotional hunger scale. So an urge can go from a 0, which is neutral, to a -10, which is unbelievably strong. So according to Pema's teachings, what I'm saying to you as you start doing this work is that if you have an urge at a -2, it will be much easier to do this practice, the 3-step process, than it will be at a -8. So choose the easier ones first, and know that even if you go through the 3-step process, you take your 3 breaths, and then you eat something, you have still done more. You just keep practicing. And if you do that, I promise you, you will get stronger. This is a 2,500-year-old technique, and Pema doesn't lie. She just doesn't. So I really want you to take this in, and I want you to think about all I've talked about with urges in these last 3 podcasts, and I want you to practice. I want you to know that as a human being, we have discomfort, and that we have the ability to be able to stay with it. And this Buddhist philosophy, regardless if you're a Buddhist or whatever the heck it is, it's just a technique and it's information that if it makes sense to you, use it. You don't have to be a Buddhist. I'm not a Buddhist, but I certainly like the teachings. So if this sounds good to you, try this 3-step process. I'm so excited for you to try it and know that whatever part of it you get to is all better than not doing it at all. Even if you just get to the part where you say, this is an urge. If that's all you do, you've at least acknowledged it. You have depersonalized it. Okay, so that's what I have for you this week. And you will practice. You will go to my show notes. You will read this 3-step process. You will share it with other people because this is the beginning of how you get powerful and strong. Not only about having a thin, fit, healthy body, but having a thin, not a thin brain. I was going to tell you have a thin, healthy, fit brain. No, but to have a healthy, fit mind. That is where I'm talking about. That is what we're talking about. When you have a healthy, fit brain, you will have a thin, healthy body that will go with it. So as always, before I end this podcast, you know what I'm going to say. No matter what you do this week, please practice this 3-step process. And while you're doing it, please be very, very kind to yourself. And I'll see you next week. Bye-bye. If you've been loving my podcast, please subscribe. And also, please review if you're loving it. The way you heard about it is the way many people hear about it. They Google it or they look for it. And the only way that it pops up is by who reviews it. So if you're loving it, let's pass on the good word and the good news. Thank you.